Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks for joining. It's Alisa and Airteam community here. Just a small reminder what we are doing. We are bringing together three side of participants, freelancers from marketing, from design and web development who want to work around the world, and we are matching them with mentors and employers in Europe and US, and helping to find a job, to write a CV, and also to find mentors. And we have today here Vala Dormiani. Vala, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about the company and what you're doing?
Sure, yeah, happy to. So I'm Vala, I'm CEO of Ludus Analytics. Originally from New Zealand, grew up in Australia, and then came out to the US for college with Stanford undergrad, Stanford grad school, and Stanford GSB as well. Ludus is a company I started before the GSB with three other co-founders. We're basically a data platform to help organizations with segmentation use cases. So a lot of data science, a lot of machine learning goes into that, to help make it easier for organizations to essentially segment their stakeholders. So that has applications in sports, so on-field performance, to be able to group your players and identify players. So if a particular player gets injured or needs to be replaced, or you can. And then also it has off-field fan engagement, customer engagement use cases to see what kinds of demographics your fans are kind of split into, and who are the most engaged, who are maybe whales that you want to get engaged. And so that's essentially what we focus on is segmentation use cases and making that easier for brands, organizations, sports teams, those types of things.
Okay. When did you come to the US? Like how many years ago? And you said you came for Stanford undergrad. So how old you were?
Yeah, so I was, I think it's a pointed question, that one. I was 14 when I started at university at Stanford, and I came out in 2005 was when I came out for undergrad. Originally, as I mentioned, from New Zealand, grew up in Australia. My parents are Iranian, so also a bit of a connection there. And that was when I came out to the US to study here in the US.
Okay, and what was your major? Like, what did you study in Stanford?
Yeah, so I did computer science, I did management science and engineering. Being so young when I started, I didn't want to be 17, 18 and into the real world. And so I also did some master's degrees here at Stanford in both computer science, management science and engineering, communication. Did a few different degrees to basically be the right age when I left, as opposed to someone particularly young.
Yeah, like being 14, it's very difficult to make these decisions, I think.
Exactly.
And did you start your career in US as an entrepreneur right away, or did you work for US companies? Like, what was your first job after Stanford?
Yeah, I actually started in companies. It's particularly hard to kind of start a company immediately as a non-US national. And so I joined a company called Slice, which was an e-commerce analytics business. I led products there and a variety of different things there. It was a company that was founded by Stanford GSB entrepreneurs who had previously founded a company that was incredibly successful called Fiber Tower. And this was their second company together. I was fortunate enough to get connected to them through the Stanford network and joined them. When that company got acquired by Rakuten, I jumped over to Innovation Endeavors. So spent some time as a VC, venture capital investor, investing in early stage companies. I mostly focused my career on the big data space. So big data infrastructure companies, big data analytics companies. And so spent some time at Innovation Endeavors before going in-house to a company called Cloudera, which went public. It was a bit of a bigger company that I joined as led product strategy there. And so got some experience at a startup that got acquired, some investing experience, and then a company that went public. Before I finally got my green card, which was the trigger for me to actually start a company. And so fairly long journey from, I think it ended up being 8 years or so between, when I first entered, actually more than that, it was about 11, 12 years from when I entered the US to when I got my green card and started a company, it was
Okay.
about 8 years of work experience before I started my own company.
And was it easy to find a job? I guess like Stanford should play some role in that.
Yeah, I was fortunate. It wasn't overly difficult to find a job, but that was purely because of the Stanford network. I think that was that's a little bit atypical, but it wasn't overly difficult to find a role because, like, I was fortunate that most Silicon Valley tech companies, they're all here, right? They're all kind of wanting to hire Stanford folks, and then I just needed to decide that I want to go to a smaller company to get more kind of hands-on experience, or a bigger company, and so I decided to go smaller first. To have more practical experience before jumping into something a little bit bigger. Cloudera. Cloudera was still obviously not, it's not a Facebook or a Google, but it's a company that was, I think, about 500 people when I joined. It was 2,000 people when I left 4 years later. In that time, we went public as well. And so got a lot of experience at a substantive bigger company as well as kind of a smaller startup.
Mm-hmm. What do you prefer? Like working on a smaller startup when like you have a big scope of work, or like working for a bigger company where you're more like specific in your role?
Yeah, I mean, I generally prefer the smaller company. It's why I then founded my own company. I think at Cloudera, I was fortunate that it was a non-traditional kind of role. I was responsible for product strategy and emerging businesses, and so what that essentially meant a lot of the time was it was essentially like a smaller startup within the broader ecosystem. We would either acqui-hire a company, or we would start a new product line in-house, and I'd have responsibility to try to basically make it a real thing, give it real traction before we could pass it on to day-to-day operations. And so as a result of that experience, while it was a big company, we had the resources of a bigger company, my role was still relatively startup-y in feel, which I was very fortunate to. I think it was sort of tailored for me for what I wanted to get out of it. And everyone always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so the Cloudera folks did a great job of making sure I got a role that was consistent with my ambition, which was to start my own company.
Mm-hmm. And it took you like 8 years to start your own company. And what were the main reasons? Like you were feeling that you're lacking experience, so it was like purely like documents, and the fact that you're a foreigner? Like what was the main factor that it took you quite long to start your own business?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. Obviously, I like having started in Silicon Valley so young, I wanted to get some experience, wanted to get some substantive experience across a variety of different sectors. Always had ambition to spend some time in venture capital, was able to do that. Wanted to spend some time at a startup and a bigger company to be able to blend those two experiences. So part of it was to get experience, but I was always very antsy and kind of anxious to start a company, motivated to start a company. And so a lot of the reason for waiting was actually paperwork and green card stuff. Like the green card took longer than I kind of expected, and it ended up being a blessing because I was able to get a bunch of experiences in the interim. Mm-hmm. But the main reason for not starting a company any sooner was the sort of paperwork. I went through initially the like OPT track post graduation. So spent, I think it was about 3 years on the OPT. And then after that was eligible to kind of apply for my green card, which is what I did, which is for an Australian national is only really supposed to take maybe 2 years. Mm-hmm. Mine took 4 or 5, I think 4. And mainly the reason it took longer was just extra steps that were added in the process during the last kind of administration. So it was a little bit annoying, but I was, again, fortunate that I was being Australian. I didn't have to go through the H-1B process. They have a special visa, Australia and the US, which is called the E3. So I was on the E3 visa, didn't have to win a lottery or anything like that, which meant I wasn't as in as much of a rush to get the green card sorted, because I always knew that I could just kind of be on the E3 for as long as needed. That's a long-winded answer to your question. It was a combination of both wanting to get more experience and making sure that my paperwork and visa status was in such a way that like I could actually found a company and could be the signatory for my company without having to kind of defer to and just be an employee instead.
Okay, just I want to specify for our listeners because not everyone knows what is OPT. OPT is basically the extension to your student visa that they give to you after education in the US. And it can be from 1 to 3 years, something like this.
Yeah, so everyone who graduates from a U.S. institution gets 1 year, and then if you graduate with a STEM degree, so a math engineering type degree, so mine was also computer science, management science, and engineering, you get basically a 2-year extension or an 18-month. It's something like essentially ballpark. You end up getting about 3 years in total if you have a STEM degree, and kind of 1 year if it's a non-STEM degree.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for the explanation. I think it's important, and it's one of the ways to receive documents in US is to go studying, like then get an CPT. I think this is something that when you do the internship, then OPT to work for a year or 3 if it's like STEM, and then you can apply for different visas.
Yep.
And being a foreigner, like working for US companies, have you seen some like cultural differences with like Australia? Like that's something that was challenging for you, maybe that you can mention?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I was fortunate that I started my like professional career in the U.S. So there wasn't a lot of cultural professional differences that I had seen because I started here and went through here. The cultural difference between maybe Australia and here is pretty minimal. I think it's quite similar, those two countries, in a lot of ways. I think probably the biggest difference that's not necessarily a difference between the US and Australia, but maybe Silicon Valley and the rest of the world is in Silicon Valley, there's a higher tolerance for risk because I think there's a lower kind of criticism for failure, for lack of a better way to describe it. So if you start a company and the company doesn't go successfully, it's a badge of honor. It's seen as like a lot of experience that's useful for the next thing that you might do. Whereas in the rest of the world, that's not necessarily the case. The big cultural difference, frankly, between Silicon Valley and the rest of the US, Silicon Valley and the rest of the world is this embracing of risk and embracing of kind of everything is possible, anything is possible. And so shoot for the stars rather than be doing something conservative, because failure is not doesn't have as big a stigma as it does maybe in the rest of the world.
Yeah, and more traditional business, especially. I also have this feeling. I lived in San Francisco for like 4 years, and I think we are a bit in the bubble there. When you go out, you're like, oh my God, it's still just 21st, like just 21st century. I thought it's like 25th already because we have like robots delivering like food and self-driving cars on the street, and the rest of the world is a bit like, what is online banking? It's like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now you have your own company and you started it on your own, or you have co-founders? Like how did you start?
No, so I have 3 other co-founders and we started the company early 2020. So that was sort of ballpark the timeline. The co-founders and how we came together, there are basically 3 other co-founders. One who's based in Australia, actually, who I went to high school with. He manages a lot of our kind of Australasian, Asia Pacific kind of customer relationships. And then Bo, who was financed in New York before jumping over to the Bay Area, and was venture capital and private equity here in the Bay Area before focusing on jumping in-house into a company called Sentio, where he also was involved in product. And then we overlapped in venture capital a lot. When he was a VC and I was also a VC, we would kind of share deals and share insights, and so that we became close there. And then Samir was at a company that we acquired at Cloudera, and then was with me at Cloudera as a senior engineering leader there before doing the same at Uber, before joining us as our CTO. And so it was 3 different connections that I had, all people I think incredibly highly of, that we were able to bring together to start Ludus, and go from there.
Okay, and so your like main product is like big data and analytics for your clients. I guess you hire a lot of data scientists, and we just had a webinar with recruiters, and they said that there is a huge lack on the market, like of a good data scientists. And can you tell us a bit more, like who do you hire, what are the roles, like a bit of the structure, like in your company?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two types of engineering resources in our company. There's the platform engineers, who are basically the software engineer skill set, and then there are the data scientists, which are the obviously data science skill set. And then beyond kind of the engineering team, obviously we've got designer, we've got sales, we've got marketing, those sorts of roles. In terms of how we hire, frankly, being a relatively small company, we've been fairly nepotistic in our hires. People that we know, people we were connected with, people we had worked with before. We're now coming to the stage where we're hiring kind of more broadly. And so we are now kind of opening up, going through traditional channels of, accepting resumes and going through interview processes. But that's a relatively new process for us. Most of the team, we're a team of about 15 or so people. So far has been like people I had worked with before, people that folks on the team had worked with before. In terms of what people are doing, the software engineers work on the actual platform itself. So the front end and the back end of the data platform that we provide to our customers. The data scientists provide the content that we produce out of the box. And so we're first and foremost a SaaS business, first and foremost a platform company. What we do is sell a data platform, but that data platform is intended to make it easier for organizations to run segmentation algorithms. And so one of the ways we do that is we integrate data and we produce content out of the box on our platform. So that platform is not basically an empty bookshelf, for lack of a better way to describe it. It actually has content that it comes with. And so our data scientists build the content. So they interrogate the data that we ingest, whether it be sports data, Web3 data, like any type of kind of market data, and then build algorithms and visualizations on top of it. So clustering algorithms, similarity score algorithms, those types of content that allows our customers to immediately get value from the platform before they build their own content within the platform.
And should your customers be a good data scientist themselves, or like it doesn't like require that deep of a knowledge of the data science? It's like a bit easy.
Yeah, not necessarily. So we're optimizing for organizations that don't have a ton of software engineers in-house and so the creating data workflows are difficult for them. That's the type of customer that we go after. In particular, as a result of that, a lot of the organizations that we also work with don't have a ton of data science resources either. So that's why we provide a platform that has content and has visualizations out of the box, so that executives, general managers, those types of folks who aren't necessarily technical enough to build their own content can immediately get value from the product. That being said, we are a data platform, so we allow the organizations to interrogate the data themselves, build their own content themselves. But first and foremost, we're about making it easy to navigate the existing data that they care about. And so it doesn't necessarily require a high barrier of technical sophistication to clear.
Okay. And some cool examples of like how your clients improve their business, like by using your platform?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the easiest one on the sports side is optimizing player recruiting, player performance. So the identifying who they should bring into the organization that would exponentially improve their performance based on what the coaches care about, what the coaches want. Those are all kind of data based in our platform. And then that's the on-field use case. And then obviously the off-field fan engagement use case is who are the types of users that are engaged with a Web3 asset, for example. Like if an organization has minted an NFT or minted a Web3 asset, who are the types of people, how do they break down in terms of the folks that have engaged with that asset? For example, are they folks who have a lot of other assets in crypto? Are they new? Is this one of the first things they've ever purchased in Web3? Are they day traders who just transact really frequently, so they're not really engaged with the asset that they've purchased? It's primarily about making money for them, versus folks who are kind of hit and hold type people who are buying the thing and then conserving it because they care about the brand. And obviously we're selling to brands who maybe don't necessarily care as much about whether the price of their asset went up and down, but rather who is the community of people that are engaged with the asset, who are the types of people that they may be able to target better. And so those are the types of use cases, both on field and off field. The consistent thread there is it's also standard data that we ingest, integrate, interrogate, and provide content on top of, so that organizations can get more value from the data they're already purchasing or at least already have access to.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are cool use cases, especially about Web3. I'm like very interested to hear more about that and how you actually track it, because in Web3, like in blockchain, everything should be like encrypted. So how can you really like check which like users are interacting with the product? And
yeah, we use, I mean, wallets are a great proxy there, right? Like everything that is the unit of interaction in Web3 anyway. So now I as a personal user may have multiple wallets, but at least there's visibility into each of those wallets and what they look like. Now, associating that wallet back to me may be difficult, but at the very least, we know the wallet, what is in that wallet, how much is in that wallet, what else has been engaged with that wallet. And so there's greater level of security and privacy because it's hard to associate that with me, but there's actually greater visibility in terms of the data as well for organizations to get more context. So it's almost in some ways like the best of both worlds. I don't necessarily want Nike or Adidas or whatever it is to know who I am specifically, but if I've through my wallet purchased their asset, I would actually love the idea of them giving me targeted offers, them giving me things that are specific to me, because like I like those brands, I care about those brands, and so in some ways it's the best of both worlds. I don't have to give away my privacy, but they can get information about me to give me tailored, kind of targeted content and products and offers, and so that's essentially what we try to facilitate.
Okay, yeah, I went a bit off topic because it's Web3 is something
of course.
I'm very much interested in. And if to come back to the data science as a profession, because we have a lot of people in our community who are looking to transit in their profession, like who are looking to receive new knowledge and skills, and data science looks like a very promising and very perspective profession. So what makes a great data scientist? What, like, maybe you can name, I don't know, like top 3 hard skills and top 3 soft skills that the data scientist should have?
So the top 3 like hard skills, I think for me, like knowing SQL, knowing Python, knowing R, those are just kind of required for that piece of the puzzle. For us, beyond kind of that, is obviously a knowledge of visualization libraries as well, and how to actually visualize the data. So things like ggplot, Python Dash, R Shiny. If they have React skills, that's even better, because being able to surface their content in a visually appealing way is a really compelling part of what we try to do for our customers. And then the other, hard skills, just obviously being quite familiar, at least at the academic level, with the types of algorithms that are necessary. So clustering algorithms, neural networks, similarity algorithms, Euclidean distance types. Like, so it's a combination of knowing the algorithms well, that they want to be able to execute against the data sets, having the language skill sets in terms of SQL and Python and R to actually be able to interrogate those data sets, and then the visualization layer, being able to actually communicate that information visually to our potential customers, and just surfacing that content within the product itself. Those are the hard skills. I think that in soft skills, in terms of the soft skills that I think are also necessary, communication is the biggest one. Being able to communicate effectively, that's like a be all and end all with everyone in the organization. Teamwork, being able to work in a team. No one really works in isolation or in a silo at Ludus. And so that's particularly important. I think the third piece, particularly because we're a startup, is just sales, comfortable talking externally, comfortable like communicating what you've built externally. That may not necessarily be true at some of the bigger organizations because it's more targeted and more specific in terms of the role is more focused. But for us as an entrepreneur, as a startup, as a group of entrepreneurs, essentially, we all need to be able to sell because that's an important part of a B2B company. And so while not necessarily specific just to a data scientist, that is consistent for anyone working at a startup, you need to be able to sell. And so those are kind of the soft skills that I would say.
Okay, and is it easy to find a good data scientist in the US? Like,
generally in the US, no. I would say we're fortunate that like all of my colleagues and I have worked in Silicon Valley for a long time, good connections back into Stanford. So we're maybe fortunate in that we have like a leg up in that space than others would. But generally, I think it's hard to find good technical resources because they're in such high demand. Everyone wants a data scientist. Everyone wants software engineers. That's why they become the bottlenecks. I think there's an evolution of the Excel analyst that used to be very common is now becoming more of a data science skill set, and the analyst is needing to evolve to become a data scientist, and that will alleviate. As that evolution happens, that will alleviate some of the constraints on demand. But it's always hard to hire. It's always hard to find the right people, and so data science is no exception.
And do you work with professionals outside of the US or at that moment?
We have some folks in Australia, obviously, which is my home country, and one of my co-founders is based there, which is helpful. We have worked with contractors at various times, primarily out of India, but we focus primarily most of our technical research in the US. We expect to be expanding into beyond just the US kind of now and going forward, primarily because the cost structures are obviously cheaper outside the US. And so that is something we will be looking into and we'll be focused on. But for now, most of our resources are in the US. They just might not necessarily be always Silicon Valley resources. We've got some folks on the East Coast, some folks on in like Atlanta, for example, that like make it that those are slightly cheaper cost structure places than San Francisco. But we will be looking internationally as well going forward as we scale our team. Obviously, we're still a relatively small team, so as we scale, we will be looking internationally.
Okay, and there should be a very big like time difference between Australia and US.
It is. Time difference to me has never really been that big an issue. There is a significant overlap between Australia and the US, and kind of their mornings are our afternoons, and so there is enough overlap in the day to be able to communicate and work together. But I think like at a startup in particular, there is no, oh, you're working 9 to 5. It's sort of like you work when you need to work. And so there's that happens a lot in terms of I'm up at random hours talking to Australia. They might be up at random hours talking to me. As we scale, as we get bigger, we'll have obviously centers of excellence throughout the world. And so there's less need to be able to interact. But as we're small, as we're nimble, it's just the work hours go out the window. You work when you need to work.
Okay. That's fair. And if a person wants to start a career as a data scientist or analyst, where would you suggest he begins? Like maybe some books or courses, like where should he start?
I mean, Coursera in particular is probably a good place to start. It's got a whole section on machine learning and data science. Stanford also surfaces some of their own kind of almost executive learning, kind of continued learning type content that I highly recommend. Some through Coursera, some directly through themselves, and so those are probably the places to start. I think a lot of these video courses, in particular, are quite useful to get folks up to speed on what the basics of what they need to know on the algorithm side, on the Python side, on the R side, and so I think that's probably the best place to start is some of these kind of online courses. Coursera is a great resource, and I'm obviously biased towards Stanford, so loyal towards Stanford. So Stanford's always a great resource as well.
Yeah, we will share some links with our community later. Any books, any cool books that you know?
I mean, there's a lot of kind of books out there. Nothing specific that jumps to mind, but there's a ton of good books out there that might be relevant. Anything, frankly, that has ML, data science, machine learning, is a good place to start. I think online resources are, I think, better for this type of learning than books. Books are probably, I think, in my mind, at least, better for some of the soft skills stuff. But that's, again, my own bias.
Yeah, I actually had the last question. Are you hiring now? Like, do you look for some specific roles like to close? And yeah, we have a database of like 700 professionals. We also have like data scientists in our network. So just to find out if you're looking for any people right now.
We are actually, so we are hiring. I think the roles in which that we are focused on is one, designer. We actually want to bring in another designer to help us bring greater delight in our product. And so that's one role. And then obviously we're, as a data platform company, we're always looking for data scientists to be able to be helpful to us. As we scale customers, we typically need more data scientists to help support those customers and support what we're trying to build. And so those are probably the two roles that we're most focused on, is data science and designer. And so I suspect there's probably plenty of both in your network that might be relevant.
Yeah. And do we have any questions from the audience? Alona, Julia? No, I don't think we're going to have questions, but we will post the recording in our group. I just received a message from a couple of people who could not join, so they will watch the recording, and we can probably send you questions a bit later.
Sure.
And thank you so much for joining and for your interview. So have a great day. And we will post a recording with all the links a bit later in our community.
Sure, happy to. Yeah, and if you can forward me the link as well, that would be great. And appreciate the invite to do this. Happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks.